Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to take a first look at Silent War 2.0 from Compass Games. In this game, you manage U.S. submarines in World War II, ranging anywhere from a single patrol that can take about an hour to, get this, the entire U.S. submarine command during the span of World War II in the Pacific, a long campaign game that can take upwards of 200 hours. So there is a ton of gameplay in this box. Now, this version 2.0 is a complete reworking of the original game from 2005. They've upgraded the counters, the artwork, the rules. They've play-tested the campaigns, refined some of the campaigns. The past 2 years has been spent on play balancing various campaign elements. They've added in the expansion as well, Imperial Japanese Navy, which gives you a greater variety of warships. There is a ton of stuff to look through. Let's jump right in and get started. I am very excited to show this to you. I've spent about an hour, maybe hour and a half or so looking over the components, kind of reading through the rules and things like that. And I have two comments right up front that I just want to say. First up is, this is one of the most magnificently designed war games that I've seen since I've been back in wargaming now for about 2.5 years or so. And the second thing is, this is just laden with historical information, as we'll see and go through the components. Those two things together make me feel like this is very much a labor of love. The developers and the designers look like they have really tried to make this shine in every way possible. So I think that'll be evident as we go and we look through the components and stuff that's inside here. Let's get started though and take a look at some of the bigger parameters here that are on the back of the box. First up, this is complexity medium to medium high. That feels about right. I mean, that long campaign game here that it says on this average time to play, 1 to 2 hours for a patrol game, up to 200 hours for the full campaign. It's important to know that there are a lot of play experiences in between those two extremes. As we take a look at the scenarios, I think that'll be evident. So don't think your choice is either playing for an hour or playing for 200 hours. That's not the case at all. Number of players here is 1. It is a solitaire game. There are some head nods made towards cooperative play, where you could kind of each command a specific area of World War II, specific kind of a sector of the war, if you would. I think that would work really well. That would be fun to do. Obviously, if you're talking about pairing up for a very long campaign, that would be kind of the logistical challenge there. But its heart here really is a solitaire game with some kind of possibilities for collaborative play. Time scale says about 20 minutes per turn, and a turn is about a week. So you can kind of get a sense, again, if you're playing that whole war, how much time that's going to take. And then complexity here, medium to medium high. I think, you know, I've looked through the rules, and with all the stuff that's in here, it looks fairly overwhelming, but a lot of it really is data. And I think as we take a look at that, we'll see that's the case. I do get a sense that the complexity does very much feel like a medium to medium high. I think if I were going to give it an estimate of complexity, I'm going to go a 4.5 out of 10. There's just a lot to manage here, a lot to look at, but it doesn't seem, the gameplay in and of itself doesn't seem overly complex. I wouldn't let the complexity or the scope and size of this scare you off. Solitaire rating, 1 to 10, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. There's just a ton of solitaire play in here, and it is a game that's fully designed for solitaire play. So, as we mentioned in the introduction here, again, you're controlling U.S. submarine fleet in World War II, trying to take down the Japanese. The victory conditions in this game very much are based on tonnage sunk, and then compared to how many submarines you lose over the course of whatever particular campaign that you are executing. And so that's, you know, you're trying to match up against historical elements in there as well, and lots of different things can go sideways in terms of events and weather and things like that. So there is a ton of stuff that is modeled in this game. We get some baggies, we get some dice as we start to look at our components, and let's start with our 3 pieces of documentation. We get a rules of play, we get a rather robust, the biggest one here is the scenario book, and then we get the IJN Imperial Japanese Navy 2.0 expansion that again used to be sold separately in the original game, and now all of it's included in this one big version 2.0 edition. So let's jump in now and take a look at the rules of play. Now, rules of play here, 32 pages, but there is a lot of kind of historical context in here. I will also say this rule book is just gorgeous. I mean, I love this. It's all full cover, kind of color, very lightly glossed, but you've got just this historical kind of context and information and pictures and little historical tidbits that are tossed around in the rules in here. It's just really, here's the, for example, the submarine's torpedo data computer, which is just, I mean, you have pictures of the stuff here, models of the subs and things like that. This is all just extra little pieces, but it just so helps pull you into this epic game of submarine combat in the Pacific theater. I love the layout. I love the emphasis on the use of color. This is so professionally done. And again, this is my understanding is this is completely reworked in terms of the layout and design from the original 1.0. Now, again, there, 31 pages. There is a good bit of text here, but again, lots of graphics to help you out. This is such a well done and beautiful rule book. Again, as we just kind of look at the charts and the tables they pull in to help kind of make the learning go flow in here. There's commentary on here that's added. There's a lot of individual examples that are tossed in as well. We've got the sequence of play articulated here too. So just a lot of guidance, I think, to help you learn the game. Look at little pictures of torpedoes to help with the torpedo movement rate. This is such a polished manual. I've not seen one. I'm trying to think of a manual that has a higher degree of excellence in terms of layout. This is really, really well done. Now again, the caveat here is I have no idea how this game plays. I never played the original. Once I saw it on Compass Games' website, I said, I really want to check this out. I placed an order for it, I think almost 2 years ago, and it's been a while in the making here. So I can't make any claims as to how this game plays, but it is evident they have cut no corners in putting together the manual and the information. I mean, look at this, the setup. There's a whole picture of it. It's awesome. They've done just a fantastic job here. The print, really big, nice and clear. It looks like it's easy to go through. And, despite these 32 pages of rules, the sequence of play in and itself really isn't all that kind of complex. There's, 4 parts to it here. One is this kind of strategic segment where you're looking for war events and torpedo improvement, and then the intelligence and weather phase. Then we go down here to the triple R segment, which is reinforcement, repair, and readiness. Then the operations segment where patrols are moving, and then you're doing search and combat and executing any of the combat that would happen in here. Transit movement for some of the long-term movement, and then an end turn segment that basically cleans up what happened and then advances the war. So, that's a very logical and very easy to follow, I think, sequence of play, but that gets at that whole idea. And you're kind of looking through the rules and things like that. There aren't any rules in here that seem overly complex. I mean, they've got a lot of historical elements. There's weather, there's the torpedo problems that happened with the US submarine fleet at the beginning of the war and how those are modeled. They talk about how to, kind of repair ships, how to move ships around, how to execute combat, how to suffer counterattacks, how the Japanese ships are going to move and stuff like that. So a lot of it is kind of learning how the system works, but it's not overly complex. So I think this will be a game that would be, again, feels about a 4.5, I guess, on a 1 to 10 scale in terms of complexity. Now let's jump in and take a look at our scenarios, because I think this gives a good idea of the scope of the game. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how some of the different scenarios in the game. This is a 60-page document, the vast majority of which contains the information for the various scenarios and patrols that you can play in the game. And we can divide these up roughly into 3 categories. There are long campaigns, of which there are 7 of them. There are shorter campaigns, which there are 4 of them. And then there are some Rule Britannia campaigns that there are 2 of them. Then you have your individual patrol games as well. So if we think of that 1 to 200 hour span of game here, these patrol scenarios, which basically ask you to recreate kind of famous World War II submarine patrols in the Pacific theater and compare how you do to those historical patrols, those are like an hour or 2 experiences. The very first long campaign is the entire submarine campaign against Japan, starting in December of 1941 and continuing on until the end of the war. That's the one that can last 200 hours. But let's walk through a little bit what some of these are, because I think that would be helpful, at least for me, knowing whether this would be a game I might be interested in, because there is a lot of different stuff that's modeled in the game. So when we start the scenario book here we get up now, we have some information on the submarine master list, so you know which submarines are kind of brought into the game and what times they're coming in and stuff like that. This is the long campaign, that entire submarine campaign. That's campaign number 1. Now, campaign number 2 is Red Sun Rising. This is the first year of the war, December 1941 to December 1942, the entire Pacific theater, but you're just playing 1 year. Then Turning the Tide campaign covers from the resurgent strength of the submarines in the Pacific it has played to the end of the war. So it starts in April of 1943 and it goes to the end of the war. So this is a rather hefty one, but again, you're not playing the full length of the war. You're playing kind of that middle, that back half of the war with different starting conditions and things like that. Then campaign number 4 is Red Sun Setting. This is one that covers the final year of the war. Then you have campaign number 5 is MacArthur's Navy. This is a really cool way, I think, to kind of give a player a shorter gameplay experience, yet lengthen the time. So this is MacArthur's Navy. This is the submarine campaign in the Southwest Pacific. So you're not fighting the entire scope of the Pacific theater, you're fighting in these operation areas only, but the game does cover, starts in December 1941 and lasts until the war ends. So you're not playing the Pacific theater, you're playing a section of it to kind of speed up gameplay, yet still give the player kind of a full war experience. And then number 6 here, which is really cool, if we go up into here, this is the order of battle for number 5. Campaign number 6 is East Wind Early. This is a submarine campaign in the 1930s. It starts, I think, in 1932 or 1933, and it's a hypothetical campaign. How cool is that? And there are counters for this and kind of modifications to the Japanese fleet, modifications to the US submarine force to allow you to play this campaign here. And this is one of those examples. This is totally, you could so easily leave this off. This would take a ton of time to do, and you can get a sense again for what an incredible labor of love this game is. And I want to call right here, here again we have Charles Andrews Lockwood. This is a whole historical tidbit on Charles Andrew Lockwood and his story in World War II. And the manual and the rule book, the player aids, the game boards, the scenarios book is just laden with this type of historical tidbits that just pull you into the time and the period. Nothing to do with gameplay, just enhance that experience and get you excited and ready to play the game. And again, these two things, these kind of campaigns that just, they don't have to be here. This must have taken hours and hours to do, and it's just another campaign in the book and all this historical information. Total labor of love, and it just, this attention to detail and adding all these pieces in here just really shows. So Japanese battleship doctrine, that's kind of cool in that hypothetical 1930s scenario too. But then we come, those are the long campaigns. Then we have shorter campaigns. This is Desperate Pearl. So Desperate Pearl here, I believe is the first half year of the war. It starts in December 1941 and ends in June 1942. And you're managing only 37 submarines altogether, and you're limited to the operations. So this is kind of a 6-month shorter campaign. So again, if we think of that 200-hour experience and the 1-hour experience, there are a ton of experiences that range that gamut between them that you can pick from. So you don't want to feel like you've only got a couple of limited choices here. Another short campaign number 2, focuses on the first 6 months of the war, but in the Southwest Pacific. So again, just these zones here, which are different than the zones in the kind of this first short campaign. We've got a short campaign in here. Then another cool part about some of these short campaigns, this is number 3, this is a Dutch campaign. So you're using submarines from the Netherlands, and you fight the first half of the first 6 months of the war from their perspective. So you get, and there's counters again for the Dutch ones in here. Short campaign 3A, another alternative for the Dutch campaign that gives you a variation on that. Now what's also really cool is we've got the British submarines in here as well. This is a scenario that is quite different from all the preceding ones, as it focuses on a handful of submarines trying desperately to intercept and ward off the Japanese fast carrier raiding force that ventured into the Indian Ocean in February 1942. So with the express intent of destroying the British Eastern Fleet. So this is a scenario you can play in the game. So you get the idea. There is just a ton of stuff and creativity applied in here. And then lastly, we get British campaign against the Japanese, November 1943 to March 1944. Another scenario. So there's tons of stuff to choose from and play. And again, we get the historical backdrop. Then we come into these patrol games. There are 9 of them, and they're Allied patrols, 1, 2, and 3. US patrols and then Allied patrols. So 12 patrol scenarios as possible. that are in here as well. These again recreate famous World War II patrols, and the idea is to exceed kind of their performance during the real war, at least compare yourself to how they did. So we have the Wahoo, of course, would be here. Harder is another one. Flasher, just kind of really cool, with all kinds of historical background there too to it as well, to help you get into the mood of the different patrol. So as you can see, you know, I was talking on Twitter a little bit, and another person mentioned that this is a desert island game for a solitaire wargamer, and I totally can see that here. Tons of stuff. I mean, there are hundreds of hours of gameplay in here that you can just kind of go through. Now, these are the events, the war event tables. Depending upon what war period you're on, there can be different events that happen there. War is carved up into 4 different periods, and you progress through at a different rate. This one, this 5th area, is for that East. These are the events for the East Wind early, that 1930s campaign. And then the scenarios book finishes up with some frequently asked questions that have been kind of gleaned from online to help players learn some of the nuances of the game. Let's take a look now here at the Imperial Japanese Navy 2.0. What this basically does, gives you specific Japanese ships. Instead of generic Japanese ships in the game, this gives you specific named Japanese ships, much more so than they're in the core game. And we'll see this as we take a look at counters. This is really, in essence, this is a counter set and the guidance for how to build this into the main gameplay. I see no reason why you would not want to use this. It just adds so much more flavor to your game. Basically, this first part in here kind of just talks a little bit about how to build it into the gameplay. And this is removal dates for ships, because you're going to be managing ships coming in and out of the war, of course, for the Japanese forces. This then is the counter sheet. This is just a printing out of all of the counter sheets that are in the game. So again, very kind of brief set of rules in here. That design notes again at the end here as well. Just the rules for this are just a couple pages on how to build them into that, and it's really easy to understand how that works. So this is very simple in terms of complexity of the game. It just adds a ton of flavor, as we shall see when we start looking at the counters. There are 8 counter sheets in this game, and they roughly divide up into 3 different types. First up, we have 4 counter sheets of 2-sided submarines. And as the game mentions, every U.S. submarine in the Pacific Theater in World War II is in this game, and we can see there are a lot of them. So I think, and there are 2 sides of them. One represents, I think, a patrol kind of active combat mode, and the other is kind of its transit mode and kind of long distance mode here too. So this is more when bad things aren't happening and when things are happening. I might have a little bit of that wrong, but that's roughly what's going on here. So you can see, depending upon what the action of the sub is, you're going to be using one side or the other. These are gorgeous. They're 1.25 inches on the width here, and then 5/8 of an inch tall. Really nice clarity on everything. I kind of show some close-ups as we look at these. It's really fun to look at these. Now, what's really nice too is that, on the back side here, they show you, this submarine WS War Start. You use these and you can sort these by when they appear in the game. So we can see a lot of different subs as we kind of look through these 4 big counter sets. And the third one here has the British submarines in those scenarios that we talked about, Dutch submarines, and then there are 8 Japanese submarines here. I think these are kind of hypothetical. There are a few kind of hypothetical or exponential rules that are in for some of these, and I think these subs have to do with those. We've got a couple of markers here for the board, some more US subs, and these are 8 Japanese subs, I think, for sub-to-sub combat that can happen in the game. But again, just a marvelous 4 counter sheets of submarines. Then we're halfway through the counters. We have 2 more counter sets here. These represent all of the different counters in the game. So this is a targeting data computer readout where you get -3, which is good, to +3, which is really bad. You've got your commanders. So as a submarine performs better, you can have a famous commander appear on that submarine, giving you bonuses in combat. And then these are what you use to generate the Japanese ships in combat. So you're going to be picking some of these depending upon what type of zone you're in and what the density of Japanese shipping. There's all kinds of rules for determining what kind of things your submarines find. Some of these are named, but most of them aren't. And this is where that next set comes in. Here we have some more counters like spotted and then return to base, and then damaged and things like that. So again, for managing gameplay. But if you draw a Japanese counter in here that isn't named, that's where you start to pull up these. And this is the Imperial Japanese Navy expansion pack. These 2 counter sets, over 300 counters in here that are used to kind of bring to bear to the game, to give your game flavor, because instead of going up with generic Japanese destroyers, they are all named. We've got aircraft carriers, cruisers, battleships, a lot of the auxiliary ships too, in terms of tankers, hospital ships, and supply ships and stuff like that. Those are all given names. Generic merchantman ships are not named, but other than that, everything's got a name, and I think it includes, I think they mention almost every, if not every, major Japanese warship that was in the theater is here. So we can see tons of really cool, and we've got all of the Japanese aircraft carriers, Kaga, Akagi, battleships, Musashi is in here, all these kinds of things. So depending, you know, your subs can find all kinds of different stuff, and these counters are beautiful. This is how basically you pick them up. So if you hit a destroyer, for example, in the base game, you're going to have a cup filled with these destroyer counters. You're going to pick one up, and that's going to give you the specific Japanese destroyer. And then if you sink it, that named destroyer is removed from the game. So kind of adding a lot of different flavor and a lot of different variety to the gameplay. We are making progress. We've got player aids to look at, and there are a good bit of them here. This document on clarifications, the rulebook does mention a comprehensive example of play, and I was looking for that until I saw here that the comprehensive example of play has been removed. I will say, I think that would be helpful to have had. There are a lot of smaller examples in the rulebooks and things like that, so there is plenty of examples given, but this is quite a different game, I think, than a lot of people have played before. So seeing kind of a turn played out would have been pretty helpful, I think. But again, I don't think the complexity is going to be something that's going to drive you away. I wouldn't let that worry you. And then rather minimal number of kind of clarifications for the scenario book. Let's take a look at the player aids. Again, these are absolutely gorgeous. This is your combat display. It's two-sided, but you're only going to use one side, and it says the only difference is the image on the back. So again, let's just make one and let the player pick whichever one they think is cooler. That's pretty cool. I like this one with the sinking ship on the back. So it does look like, and again, combat to me, from the sense I get from reading the rules, it's going to be something that you're going to execute quite quickly, although you're going to be doing it a lot, right? Because you're going to have a lot of submarines on the map, especially I think in later stages of the war, that are going to be doing various search and patrol and running into Japanese ships and things like that. So I don't think an individual combat encounter takes a long time, but you are going to be doing it quite frequently. And so this is kind of how you manage that combat element of the game. Then this is the submarine tender display. You've got 8 of them here. They're all named, and this is, again, a big part of it to me strikes me as the US player. It's resource management, right? You're trying to get your damaged submarines back into action as fast as possible. You're always evaluating risk and trying to judge where you want to push your luck and where you want to be a little bit more conservative given the number of submarines you've got available. What are your priorities going to be? What areas are your priorities? All these kinds of things. So very much, I think, a resource management game, using your submarines to create the greatest impact in the war here. Now, this again, getting at something here that shows how much I think a labor of love this is. These, as far as I can tell, they have nothing to do with gameplay. They're just called a sense of scale 1 and a sense of scale 2. This is just a diagram of the US Navy Pacific submarines and the Allied and Axis Pacific submarines, starting in the 1920s and going all the way up to here in 1932, but for the US 1987. It shows the speed, the range, is all kinds of graphic information, the payload, the size of the submarines. I mean, this is just a historical artifact to just tell the story of submarines. It's so cool to. I've already spent like 15 minutes looking this over, just looking at the different sizes, the names, what's going on, like the payloads and things like that, the ranges and the speeds and everything. This is so cool. It's got nothing to do with gameplay other than helping the player tap into that sense of history. And again, I go back to that whole labor of love. That's what this really is. This one's back here. And this one here, check this out. This is the anatomy of a Gatto-class submarine, showing all the different parts and pieces and sections and rooms and stuff like that in the submarine, with pictures of them as well. I mean, what a cool player aid to help the player understand just that physical space of the submarine, of all these counters that you're managing in the game. So cool. And there's so many places in the game where you see this. It's really kind of a history lesson as you're just looking through the components, which gets you so excited to play. I have not seen a game designed in this way before, and it has been just a joy to kind of look through all the components here. 4 more player aids to go. This is your war mix table and sequence of play. We've talked about this before. Basically, you've got to kind of prime the pump in terms of where the Japanese ships and stuff like that are going to be, and different depends on a war period and their zones and things like that. And this is the chart that helps you to do that. Then we have engagement tables that's going to show how many ships show up in different areas, weather tables, ultra table down here, other tables here in the back. You are, again, kind of getting that kind of resource management. When you're in combat, you have your attack posture, either aggressive, cautious, or standard, and you can kind of be moving back and forth between those depending on how much risk you want to do. I think congregating risk is if you have a lot of submarines in one area, it tends to bring more attention to that area and create greater risk for you. This is the original engagement table from the original game. It's just there, I think, as a historical artifact. And then here, again, another historical piece. Timeline of U.S. submarine losses in World War II. This is what submarine it was and the years they were lost and stuff like that. So again, a historical artifact just to kind of pull you into the game more. Lastly, we have some 2 player aids here that help explain different pieces on the map. This is kind of a legend for your combat. These are your combat tables, counterattack, search and contact, transit event tables, then war periods here, and explains how those work. The torpedo improvement table. So as the war goes on, of course, the U.S. had horrible submarines at the beginning of World War II, problems with Newport, Rhode Island in terms of getting them fixed, and this kind of makes that gameplay mechanic bring to bear. So you don't really know when your torpedoes are going to get better. Then enemy submarines table, that's here as well. And then lastly, we have all of the counters in the game. I mean, this is a gorgeous player aid here, all of the counters and all the numbers on the counters explained, and all the different things that are doing there. So again, a really handy reference to have in terms of playing. And again, no attention to detail has been spared here. Here's your map legend in terms of helping the player dig into the game. So just a fantastic set. And I love the color palette. This is so professionally designed. It's just marvelous to see. It totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting the quality at the level that it is. This may very well be, I mean, I've been back in wargaming for about 2.5 years. I've not seen a game done to this level of just historical nuance and quality of design, and just bringing everything in to help the player enjoy the game. This is fabulous. Again, I will say this, I have no idea how this game plays, right? I have not played this game. I didn't play the original game. I don't know how it plays, but if this game, I was kind of mentioning on Twitter, if this game plays half as good as it looks, and with the attention to detail and the labor of love that's been put into the components and helping the player learn the game, I think it's going to be one of my favorite games. I mean, this is just marvelous. And fully mounted map. We've got this is 22 inches by 34 inches. I'll show a zoomed out version of this as I unfold it here, and it kind of gives you a sense. This is what you're going to be playing on. This is the Pacific Theater here, where you're going to be moving your submarines around and stuff like that. So we can see all the different areas here. We've got Midway Island is over here, Pearl Harbor submarine base is over here, and then each of these zones that you're going to be putting your submarines in. So again, that whole idea that you're going to be moving your submarines around, trying to figure out where your threats are, trying to manage this area, and trying to basically manage the submarine war in World War II in the Pacific Theater to the best of your ability. It's also surrounded by a lot of different places where you're going to be kind of managing submarines. So here are your repair holds at different submarine bases. So when submarines get damaged, you're going to be repairing them and trying to get them back out to sea. So all of these different kind of resource management elements up in here. We have, again, tonnage sunk, I mentioned, and submarines lost are your 2 parameters for victory, and this is where you keep track of those. And then a lot of different kind of gameplay aids that are up in here. Current war period, so where you are in the war, and again, each turn is a week. Current torpedo level is here. And again, it looks like, from what I can tell, this game doesn't get lost in the weeds. This is a game I think that very much could be too much detail, but I think it's the detail that's been included really has, it looks like it's going to enhance gameplay, and it looks like they have not gone too far down into just micromanaging the war. That's going to create this kind of overabundance of getting lost in too much data and too much information. I think this, even though you're talking about a long 200-hour full campaign if you choose to play that full scenario. Again, that's one of, we looked at probably 20 different ways to play this game. Even if you do that, I don't think you're going to be weeding through a lot of kind of minutia of the war. You're going to be playing through a week at a time. It's just that you've got a ton of turns to execute. And that's what I do wonder. I wonder how that's going to hold up over time in the different 4 war periods and stuff like that. But if you play a campaign that's 50 hours and have a marvelous time, you've still got so much value out of this game. So there we go. In Silent War 2.0 from Compass Games, I am totally blown away by the quality of this production, the attention to detail, just the historical references that are tossed in. Again, I'll go back to that word. I'm overusing it, I know, but just a tremendous labor of love. I am really excited to get this one to the table. It looks like it's going to be a ton of fun. Thank you so much for watching. If you have questions about the game that I can answer, please let me know down below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.